any change that's for the better is valuable. Every meal is a potential solution towards a better food system.
I'm really fluffing this badly.
You need to get into your stride.
I do need to get into my stride.
A Hodmedod is, depending where you are in Suffolk or Norfolk, it can mean a hedgehog, it can sometimes mean a snail. They're sort of round and curled up. So perhaps slightly fancifully, a bean or a pea is round and curls up in its pod. So there was a tenuous connection with the beans and peas that were our first products.
Before Nick, William and I founded Hodmedod, I was always very interested in ecology and the world around us, and the realisation that food really was this fulcrum, this central point. It's in all of our lives, it's what all of us do, and that by making choices about what we eat and how it's grown, we can really affect the world around us, both socially but also environmentally. This sense that there is this, what you could broadly call a global emergency, and you could put the climate into that, you could put biodiversity loss into that, you could put inequality of food distribution into that, you could put chronic ill health into that. And really that's what we're driven by. How do we find answers to these complex problems? How do we find a systematic approach that will allow us to make a positive shift through diet and land use? And beans and peas are just at the heart of that. What we're going to have a look at today is to see whether the beans are doing that incredible thing of fixing nitrogen. So they work with a soil-borne bacteria called rhizobia.
It's really difficult to get into it. The land we're on now is a clay soil, but for 60 or 70 years, they will have been farmed in quite a kind of oppressive way. The plant produces a nodule that surrounds that cluster of bacteria, and then the rhizobia take atmospheric nitrogen out of the air, turn it into nitrates that the plant can access. Can you see the red there? That is leg hemoglobin. So it's essentially the same as the hemoglobin that transports oxygen around our body to allow it to make use of the nitrogen. It's a really incredible, complicated process. So as well as feeding itself, this bean can potentially be feeding other crops in the field. So if we were to drill wheat into this bean crop, the wheat would grow better and need less nitrogen because the bean would be feeding it. 5%, roughly speaking, of all man-made climate emissions come from the production of nitrogen. So if we can avoid it by using plants like these beans, then that's absolutely fantastic.
One thing we need to see a lot more of across the board is diversity. And that's both diversity of the crops that are grown, but also the approaches which need to be adapted to suit local conditions. What we do is we try to work directly with the farmers to agree a price that works for them to farm viably and in the right way.
Maple Farm is a 137-hectare organic farm situated near the Suffolk coast. We started working with Hodmedod several years ago, and it's a relationship that works very well. What they're attempting to do by encouraging local farms to grow pulses, grow more pulses, because we don't grow enough in the UK. We very much try and practice a closed-loop system here within the farm, so that the only product that goes off the farm is in its finished retail packaging. Everything's incorporated back into the land.
What agroforestry is attempting to do is to create that edge effect, which in ecology is the most productive area. And by creating rows of trees with crops in between, you're essentially creating a woodland edge repeatedly where there's high nutrient levels, high biodiversity, and high productivity.
In this section, the first section we planted, there's 7 different species of trees in here.
Benefits are legion, really. There's nutrient cycling, there's bringing nutrients up from lower down to the point where the roots of the annual crops can't reach, and then distributing that on the surface in the autumn as the leaves fall down. There's moisture retention, although it might seem as if the trees are drawing moisture out of the ground. Actually, they're helping to retain moisture in the soil.
When we set this up, I thought it'd be years before we see a difference, and it wasn't. The amazing thing was that it was the first year. Just leaving the grass strips, the beetles come along. By trying to balance the system, we can move these nutrients around the farm and let the minimum amount of nutrients off the farm. We need to take as much carbon out of the system as possible. This is a perfect bird for us. I was really quite shocked to find that in order to make our hen food, we were using soya beans that were imported from China. And I thought, how can it be that we're having to bring these beans halfway across the world in order to feed our hens? And we tried all sorts of approaches. And about 15 months ago, somebody suggested to me, why not try keeping mealworms, raising mealworms, with the view to using them as an alternative to soya, because they're a high protein food source. And being insects, and chickens want to eat insects, they're just a kind of perfect match, really. The beauty of the system is we've got the flour mill next door. And when we're producing flour, that also produces bran. And the bran is the perfect medium and food for the mealworms. So we put bran in the trays, along with also some of the pea flour that comes from Hodmedods. The frass powder, which is their waste product, that's kept, and that is a fantastic fertiliser. Most conventional farms, they'll use ammonium nitrate fertiliser or other synthetic fertilisers, which is basically converting fossil fuel in the form of gas into a nutrient and replacing the nutrients like that. So really all you're doing is farming fossil fuels. That's unsustainable in the long term.
All farmers are competing with each other to achieve the highest yields in order to achieve a return that reflects their cost of production and makes them a living. If we can detach yield from the work of the farmer, then we can radically change the system. In fact, there are lots of different ways to feed the world that aren't just about yield.
Not about reducing what we pay farmers for what they produce. It's removing the incentive to maximise yields at all costs.
By making a lot of noise and demonstrating that change is possible, we can inspire farmers and other businesses in order to make changes to the way that they're working as well. We are not the change. We are simply a catalyst and an enabler for change, I hope.